Hi friends, welcome back to my channel. I'm Arpita Karwa and welcome to yet another episode of the Super 30 series. Those of you who are new to my channel, let me tell you that recently I started with this new series called Super 30 series, wherein every week we look at one unit of UGC Net Paper 1 and I discuss 30 most important topics from that particular unit. I have done thorough analysis of the recent UGC Net question papers, and based on the current trend and the question pattern, I have finalized 30 most crucial topics from each unit that you should prepare first so that you can maximize your preparation, maximize your marks by utilizing minimum study time. So, my effort in doing this entire series is just to tell you how you can study each unit, which are the topics that are most crucial from exam point of view, which are the topics that are frequently repeated, commonly seen in the question paper, so that when you begin your preparation, you are not clueless. You know that these are the 30 topics that you should tackle in order to secure full marks in UGC Net Paper 1. So, if you're new to this channel, consider subscribing to this channel and going to the playlist section and checking out all the other episodes from the Super 30 series where I have discussed 30 most crucial topics from each of those units. In today's episode, we are going to look at unit number 2, that is research aptitude, and I'm going to share with you 30 most crucial topics from this unit. So, fasten up your seatbelts and let's start. Let's start with topic number 1, which are important attributes of research. Now, as you can see on screen, there are three most important attributes of research, namely objectivity, reliability, and validity. Let's understand them one by one. Now, what is objectivity? Objectivity, in very simple words, is basically looking at things without any bias or prejudice. It means you are seeing things as they really are without letting your personal feeling or opinion get in the way. Now, in research, being objective is very, very crucial because this will ensure that whatever you are going to find out from the research is based on facts and evidence and not influenced by your personal judgment. For example, imagine a researcher who is studying the effects of different fertilizers on plant growth. They use two types of fertilizers, let's name them fertilizer A and B, and they measure how much the plant grow after 1 month. Now, if the researcher reports the data without favoring one fertilizer over the other, let's say one of these fertilizers was manufactured by his relative, and because it was manufactured by a close friend or a relative, he might have some favorable bias towards this particular fertilizer, and he might think that this fertilizer is going to be better than the other one. Now, if he has this favoritism towards one fertilizer, then the finding of the research is not going to be objective. So, it's very, very important that whenever a researcher is doing a research, he is doing it without having any prejudice, bias, or any preconceived notions. Now we move on to the next important attribute, which is reliability. Now, what is reliability? Reliability in research means consistency, stability, and dependability. That means, in simple words, that if an experiment or a study is repeated under the same condition, it should produce the same or very, very similar results. So, if I'm conducting a research and let's say I conduct the same research after 5 days or 10 days or after a month, and if I see very, very different results, that means that my research is not reliable. I cannot rely on it because it is giving me new results every time. Then is the last term, which is validity. Now, what is validity? Validity is a measure of how well a test or an experiment or a study truly reflects what it is supposed to measure. Now, to understand validity, think about a thermometer. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of a thermometer? A thermometer is needed to measure the body temperature. But let's say you are using a thermometer and instead of measuring your body temperature, it reads the pressure of the atmosphere, or let's say it tells you the pulse rate. Now, if the thermometer, rather than telling you the temperature of your body, tells you the pulse rate of your body, then in that case, the thermometer is not valid because it is not doing what it is intended to do. I'll give you another simple example. Imagine a teacher wants to test students' math skills, but the tests that the teacher conducts mostly contains questions from history and geography. Now, even if the students answers all the questions correctly, the test is not supposed to be valid because it was supposed to be measuring the math skills of the students, but it does not focus on math. Instead, it focuses on history and geography. So, in this manner, we can say that the test has low validity because it does not align with its intended purpose. So, I hope you have understood the three attributes of research. Now, there are various types of reliability and validity. I've discussed all of this in detail in my book. It's not just enough to know the definition, you need to dive deeper and also know all about the types of validity and the errors that can happen. So, do check out the portion that I've discussed in my book. Also, all these examples that I'm telling you, all of these examples have been discussed in detail in my book. I've tried my level best that in my UGC NET Paper 1 book, I give you a lot of real life examples so that these big terms like objectivity, reliability, validity doesn't haunt you like nightmares. Rather, these terms, you find them extremely relatable and you are able to understand it rather than mugging it up. Okay, we have created a special PDF that summarizes this video and provides you with exam ready notes. You just have to drop a message on the WhatsApp number that is flashing on your screen, or you can click on the WhatsApp link that is there in the description box, and we are going to send the handy PDF on your phone. Now let us move to topic number 2. I've already discussed topic 1 in detail, so we are going to quickly move through a few topics right now because I want to, keep the duration of this video really short so that anybody who wants to know all the 30 topics can watch it in one go and then can start preparing. So topic 2 is research paradigm. Research paradigms are nothing but two different paradigms which are there in UGC NET syllabus and which is also something that they keep on asking in UGC NET exam. The first one is positivism and the other one is post-positivism. There are a lot of questions related to positivism and post-positivism that you will see in the question papers. A few of them I've also included in the quiz station in my book. So do check that out after you complete your reading of research paradigm. Then comes the next topic, research approaches. Now there are three different approaches using which you can conduct your research, and you can see it is shown in a diagrammatic format in front of you. So it is very important for you to know all about these three approaches and how they are different from each other. Then comes another very interesting topic, which is methods of research. And now when it comes to methods of research, I have discussed them in under different headings. Okay, so the first one is types of research based on type of data. Okay, so if we talk about the type of data that we use in doing or conducting the research, there could be three major researches under this category: qualitative, quantitative, and mixed. Now, these are self-explanatory in its own way because if you just uh, you know uh, divide the word into two parts. Qualitative means quality, something related to quality. Quantitative means something that is related to quantity. And mixed means a mixture of qualitative and quantitative. So, I have also given a very important table at the end of the chapter number 7, under which I'm discussing all the methods of research. And in that particular table, I have discussed the differences between qualitative and quantitative because recently I've seen a change in pattern. They have been asking a lot of questions from qualitative and quantitative. Another very interesting thing is that all the other researches or types of research that I'm going to discuss after this particular topic, topic number 4, will in a way fall under either qualitative or quantitative. So you can look at qualitative and quantitative as an umbrella term under which a lot of other types of researches would fall. That's why understanding this umbrella term is very, very crucial. So even if you have done a thorough reading of what is qualitative, what is quantitative, I would still want you to check out the table that is there at the end of the chapter because that is going to kind of summarize the differences between these two and will make concepts crystal clear in your head. We have created a special PDF that summarizes this video and provides you with exam ready notes. You just have to drop a message on the WhatsApp number that is flashing on your screen, or you can click on the WhatsApp link that is there in the description box, and we are going to send the handy PDF on your phone. Now we move on to topic number 5, which is again different methods of research, but this time they are based on logic. So there are two terms that you will keep on seeing in UGC NET paper 1 question paper, which is inductive and deductive. So you will see that in logical reasoning unit as well. You will see that in research aptitude as well. So this is a term that will keep on popping up again and again. And if you are doing communication unit, you will also see inductive and deductive reasoning or communication style slipping there as well. So it is very important to know how these two terms are different. Inductive and deductive are diagonally opposite logical methods. In one we say it is a top down approach, the other one is a bottom up approach. It is summarized in a diagrammatic form, and I'm showing it from my book as well. Another very interesting cinematic example that I've given in order to make it clear in front of you is from Sherlock Holmes. Okay, so if you have watched Sherlock series, which is a Netflix series, and it's a beautiful series which talks about how Sherlock Holmes used to solve cases, you will love to see how he was using one of the style of logic. Okay, so do check out that cinematic box, which will exactly tell you that how Sherlock Holmes was solving the cases and which reasoning style was he using. Okay, so now let us move on to the next topic, which is again from methods of research, but this time we are looking at different types of research based on mode of inquiry. And as you can see on screen, there are two types of research that will fall under this category. The first one are structured research, and the second one is unstructured research. Now, what is structured research? Structured research basically would involve collecting and analyzing data in a very organized manner. That means in a very structured manner. Here in this case, researchers would follow a strict set of rules or a specific plan to gather information, and the data collected is often very numerical and can be easily analyzed to find different patterns, trends, or relationship. For example, consider the feedback forms that you get at the restaurant sometimes. Now, in this case, you will see that the researchers who are making these forms are going to create a set of specific questions to ask every customer, such as how would you rate the food, or how was the service, was it friendly, not friendly, and the questions are the same for each of the participants, and they might have fixed response options, like you have to rate it on the basis of excellent, good, fair, or poor. Now this is a structured approach because this allows researchers to gather consistent data from everyone who takes on this survey, making it very easier to compare responses and draw conclusions. On the other hand, we have a complete opposite of structured research when it comes to unstructured research. Now this, as you can see from the name itself, is a very flexible approach of gathering information that does not follow a strict or predefined plan. Instead of having a specific set of questions or a very rigid process of data collection, in unstructured research, we see that there are very open-ended questions which often lead to unexpected insights or discovery. Now, this is a type of qualitative research. I told you in the beginning that all the researches that you are going to read will fall under either quantitative or qualitative. So, you can see unstructured research is qualitative and structured research falls under quantitative research. Now, let me tell you very nice example to illustrate this topic. Let's say there's a person called Dr. Kimchi Noodleson, because this person is from Japan. Okay, that's why he has a very different name, Kimchi Noodleson. Okay, now this person is a researcher who is exploring the experiences of Indians living in Japan. Now, instead of following a very rigid protocol or set of questions, he engages in a very unstructured format. So he takes these interviews with people residing in Japan, allowing them to freely share their thoughts, experiences, and anecdotes about adjusting to life in Japan. And through these open-ended conversation, Dr. Kimchi Noodleson gains a deeper understanding of the challenges, joys, and nuances of people shifting to Japan. So you can see how on relating these topics to very simple day-to-day examples, just like I gave you an example of a restaurant feedback forum, you will see that how you can very easily understand these topics. You don't have to mug it up so much. Okay. We have created a special PDF that summarizes this video and provides you with exam ready notes. You just have to drop a message on the WhatsApp number that is flashing on your screen, or you can click on the WhatsApp link that is there in the description box, and we are going to send the handy PDF on your phone. Now we move on to topic number 7, which is again methods of research, but this time they are based on the nature of inquiry. Now you might be wondering that why is Arpita stretching this topic so much? That is because I have dedicated a full chapter on methods of research. This is such an important topic from research aptitude. Every time, in every shift, you will see at least one question coming from this particular topic. And that is the reason why I have dedicated an entire chapter. If you open my book, UGC Net Paper 1, you will see chapter number 7 is all about methods of research. I'm showcasing the index in front of you of that particular chapter, and you will see that how many different types of research methods do you have to study if you want to get those one or two questions right. And I've ensured that all these researches that I'm discussing in this chapter have been discussed along with an example so that you don't feel stuck when you are trying to understand different research, and you can remember them based on the example that I've associated it with them. Okay, now we move to topic 7, which is different types of research based on the nature of inquiry. And as you can see it on screen, there are 3 major researches falling under this category: conceptual research, empirical research, and historical research. Now, let's understand them quickly. Conceptual research kya hai? It's a type of research that focuses on exploring and developing ideas or concepts rather than gathering data or conducting experiments. So, basically, this method was very commonly used by philosophers and thinkers like Socrates and Aristotle. And if you wonder that how is this even related to today, let me give you another example. Imagine you are interested in a concept of happiness. Okay, a very simple emotion, we all feel it. Now, conceptual research would involve exploring what happiness means, how it is defined by different cultures, and what are the factors that contribute to it. Now, instead of conducting experiments or collecting data, you would dive into existing theories, writings, books that have been written around happiness, and the discussions that are taking place around happiness in different podcasts, and then you are going to come up with your own understanding in form of a research. Then on the opposite end, we have empirical research. Now, this means under this category, we are going to do a systematic collection and analysis of data and evidence to answer different research questions. So, this is exactly different from conceptual research. Now, to understand this, let me give you another interesting example. So, let's say there is this lady, Nindya Kumari. Okay, because I would want to give names so that you can associate the name of the researcher with the research that he's conducting or she's conducting. So Nindya in Hindi means neend, sleep. Okay, so Nindya Kumari करके एक बंदी है, and she's investigating the effect of screen time on sleep quality among teenagers. So she tracks the screen usage habits of 2 groups of adolescents. One group which have unrestricted access to screen before bedtime, and there is another group which has limited screen time. Now she collects data using sleep monitoring devices for several weeks, recording parameters such as time of falling asleep, time of waking up, duration of sleep, sleep disturbances, and all of this she measures and then finally comes up with a conclusion. So this kind of research where you are looking at the data and finalizing the trends and everything is known as empirical research. And then we have historical research. Now this, as the name suggests, involves studying past events, people and cultures to understand how things have changed over time, and we also uncover the stories and factors that have shaped the present. So researchers are we are using various types of sources like documentaries, photographs, artifacts, and oral histories to piece together the past and gain insights into historical events. A very classic example of historical research would be if a person is looking and researching the Indian independence movement to study the role of, let's say, Mahatma Gandhi in the struggle for freedom. So in this case, he is actually doing a historical research. So these are 3 major types of research that are based on nature of inquiry. We have created a special PDF that summarizes this video and provides you with exam ready notes. You just have to drop a message on the WhatsApp number that is flashing on your screen, or you can click on the WhatsApp link that is there in the description box, and we are going to send the handy PDF on your phone. Now we move to your next set of research, which is based on application. Now this is again a very important topic. काफी बार question आते हैं. I am running short of time for this video, so I'm just going to tell you the names. For more details, and if you want a deeper understanding with examples, you can go and read it from my book. You'll understand it in one go. This is my promise to all of you. I have tried my level best to write it in such a simple language that even a 6th or 7th grade student can understand all these types of research. And all the examples that I've been quoting so far are directly from my book. So once you read the book, you will get all these examples very clearly sitting in your head. Okay, so talking about based on application, then we have 3 types of research: fundamental, action, and applied research. It's very important to know all of them. Fundamental research ke liye I've already added a video in the book, so that if you get bored of reading the text, you can just take a break, scan the QR code, watch a video lecture wherein in animated format you can understand what is fundamental research, and then you can start reading the book from there on. Okay, now we move on to the next topic, which is related to action research, and why I have created a separate topic. I have not included this under topic number 8 because this needs specific study. So you just do not need to understand what is action research. You need to also know the steps involved in action research. And I have discussed this in a diagram form as well. You can see that on your screen. And finally, with this topic, we complete chapter number 7 from the book, and now we move on to the next important chapter, which is chapter number 8, which is all about steps in the research process. So topic number 10 is exactly that, steps in the research process, and it is very important for you to know the 10 steps that are involved and what is the sequence of the step, what is going to happen after which. Do we first talk about hypothesis, or is it the data analysis that happens first? At what time do we finalize the variables that are going to be in the study? And when is the time when we generalize the result of our research process amongst the general public? So all of this has to follow a specific order, which I've discussed under the topic steps in the research process. So make sure you know the order in which all the steps are performed, so that if in case a question comes in the exam asking you that, okay, organize them in the order in which they should be performed while conducting a research, you can get that question right. Okay, so now that you know different steps that are involved in the research process, it is important to look at each of them one by one. So the first 2-3 steps are not very important. That's why I have not included it under the 30 most important topics. The first important step in this entire process is knowing the variable, finalizing the variable in the entire research process. And that leads us to our next topic, which is types of variables. So it is very important for you to know different types of variables, and they are based on different categories. Okay, just like we saw different types of researches based on different things like type of logic, type of data. Similarly, we have different types of variables. So let me quickly tell you what are these variables. Very important, and it is extremely crucial for you to remember them, and you cannot mug it up, because they are asking a lot of situation based question where they will give you a research study and they will ask you that, okay, in this research study, what is the independent variable, or what is the control variable, or what are the extraneous variables, and it is very important for you to know how to find them. Okay, so as you can see on screen, we have independent variable. This is represented as IV. Okay, independent variable. Now, IV, what is an independent variable? It's a factor in a research that is changed or controlled by the researcher to test its effect on the other variables. Okay, to explain it very simply, I will tell you that let's take an example wherein we take an example of a study that is examining the relationship between the amount of sleep students get before the exam and their performance on that exam. Now, in this study, the researchers would categorize participants into two groups. One group is going to receive a full 8 hours sleep before the exam, and the other group is going to receive only 4 hours sleep, very restricted sleep. So, in this particular study, you can see that all participants undertake the same exam, but they do not get the same sleep. So, here we can say that the amount of sleep allotted to each group of participant is the independent variable, because you are manipulating it. You cannot manipulate how a student performs in the exam, because that's going to be on the student. It is going to rely on the student, but you can definitely manipulate how much sleep the student is going to get. Okay, now just like we saw independent variable, we have dependent variable. Now I've added an image of a person who is dependent, okay, who is leaning on a stick. Why? Because he's dependent on the stick, just to tell you how dependent variable is different from the independent variable. Now this variable changes as the result of the changes made in the independent variable. So in any research setting, identify the dependent variable is very crucial, because it directly reflects the effect of the changes made to the independent variable. For example, in the previous study where we were looking at the relationship between the amount of sleep students get before an exam and their performance on the exam, the dependent variable would be students' exam score. The exam scores are dependent on the amount of sleep the student received before taking the exam, which is the independent variable. Then we have something called intervening variable. Intervening का मतलब क्या होता है? If I tell you that I'm intervening the conversation that you are having with your friend, that means I am getting in the middle. I am trying and finding a way to get in middle of something that is happening. So just like that, an intervening variable, also known as mediating variable, is a concept that is used in research to explain the uh, relationship between independent variable, which is the cause, and the dependent variable, which is the effect. It helps clarify how or why a participant is doing what he is doing. If you are getting confused, let me again explain that by using an example. For example, consider the same study where we are examining the impact of sleep during an exam performance. Now here the independent variable could be students level of alertness during the exam, because हो सकता है स्टूडेंट अगर अटेंटिव ही नहीं है एग्जाम में तो वो शायद अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं करे, और रिसर्चर को लगे कि क्योंकि वो सोया नहीं है इसलिए वो अच्छा परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा है. सो देर आर सर्टेन अदर थिंग्स विच काइंड ऑफ impact the results that we get in independent variable, and that is not something which is dependent variable. Then where we have something called extraneous variable. Now extraneous variable बड़ा आसान है समझना. They are any other variable other than the independent variable that could influence the dependent variable. Now these variables are not the focus of the study, but they could potentially interfere with the results, leading to inaccurate conclusions if not properly controlled. So in the SIL example that we have been taking so far, we see that extraneous variables could include factors like the temperature of the exam room, or noise level, or time of the day, or stress level of the student. Because इन सब की वजह से भी उसका पेपर अच्छा नहीं हो सकता है, और रिसर्चर को लगेगा कि हो सकता है यार ये तो इसलिए परफॉर्म नहीं कर रहा है बिकॉज ये रात भर सोया नहीं है ढंग से. Okay, so now you might get confused between intervening and extraneous variable. Because we are running short of time, I cannot explain that to you in a very, very crisp manner. But what I can suggest is that I've given a lot of clarity corner boxes in my entire book, where if I feel that there are two concepts which look the same but do not mean the same, I have explained them in a form of a box by giving you same example and showing how different they both are. So you can check out those boxes if ever you get confused between two similar looking topics. Now is the time to look at control variable. Now control variable वो variables हैं that researchers deliberately keep the same or constant throughout the study, and they do this to ensure that any changes observed in the experiment are solely due to the effect of the variable that is being tested. So you can see that all these different variables are very, very important, because a researcher should be aware of different types of variables so that he knows how to control them, how to take care of them. Okay, then there are different types of variables other than the ones we discussed which were based on causation. Okay, कौन cause कर रहा है. Then there are types of variable on the basis of measurement, where we have quantitative and qualitative. Again, we've already discussed this term previously, so I would not emphasize more on this. You can just check it out from the example that I've shown on the screen. Then there are different types of variables on the basis of the study design. And I've used a beautiful cinematic reference to showcase that, which I'm showing on screen as well. So you can check that out. It's from my book only. Then we have types of variable on the basis of unit of measurement. So in that category, we have three types of variables: categorical, continuous, and non-continuous. I have given three simple icons to represent the three types of variables. So basically, categorical means these would represent qualitative characteristics or attributes and can take on limited specific list of options. For example, let's say blood group. So blood group में you cannot say that आप numerically blood group को represent नहीं कर सकते हो. Okay, you cannot say I have a blood group 207. That's not there. There's a specific category. For example, blood group could be A, B, AB, O, B positive, A negative, all of that, B negative. Okay, so you can see that there is a list and you can only choose from that list. So that is one kind of variable that are known as categorical. Then we have continuous variable. Continuous variable are basically quantitative variables that can take on any value within a specific range. Note that a continuous variable can be expressed in decimals as well. An interesting real life example of a continuous variable would be height of individuals, because my height could be 5 feet 3 inches or 147 characteristics. Okay, so it shifts, and I can also have 155.5 centimeters. So decimals में भी आ सकता है. On the other hand, we have non-continuous or discrete variable. ये कौन से होते हैं? They are type of variable that can only take on specific or distinct values. In simple words, they cannot be expressed in decimals. They can only be expressed in whole numbers. An interesting real life example of discrete variable is the number of siblings a person has. Now, in this scenario, the number of siblings serves as discrete variable. Why? Because each individual can have a specific countable number of siblings, such as 0, 1, 2, 3. I cannot have 2.5 brothers. Okay, that's never the case. So that's why it is going to come under non-continuous or discrete variables. So these were different types of variables. Now, since we have to move quickly to next topic, let's move on to the next topic, which is measurement of variable. अब ये बहुत ही important है, यहाँ से काफी बार questions आते हैं and इसमें scales हैं variables को measure करने की, which I have illustrated in form of table that you can see on screen. This is from my book, page number 134 to be exact. Okay, but what is important here to understand when it comes to measurement of variables is that, when we talk about different scales, you need to know the difference between each of them, because काफी specific questions आता है. तो अगर आप थोड़े भी confused हैं तो आप गलत मार्क करेंगे. But this is a topic which is extremely simple to understand. अगर आपने एक बार measurement of variable समझ लिया तो you can never get a question wrong. Okay, it is such a simple topic, but not a lot of people realize it. They would want to study something जो कभी एक आधी बार exam paper में आया है. On the other hand, there are topics like measurement of variable जो हर साल at least एक question तो यहाँ से आ ही रहा है. Okay, then we move on to topic number 13, which are types of hypothesis. So अभी हमने एक detailed discussion किया था on types of variables. Now we have types of hypothesis. Hypothesis की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो as you can see on screen, there are two main types of hypothesis: null hypothesis and alternative hypothesis. Before that, it is also important for you to know what is hypothesis. To explain it very simply, it basically means a tentative answer to a सिचुएशन. सो बेसिकली आप जब रिसर्च करते हो तो आप पहले ही एक आंसर अपने दिमाग में लेते हो, एक टेंटेटिव आंसर, उसे हाइपोथेसिस बोला जाता है. ओके, सो वी हैव नल हाइपोथेसिस एंड अल्टरनेटिव हाइपोथेसिस. नल हाइपोथेसिस को N0 बोलते हैं एंड जो अल्टरनेटिव हाइपोथेसिस है उसको H1 बोलते हैं. N1 या H1 बोला जाता है नल हाइपोथेसिस को, एंड जो अल्टरनेटिव हाइपोथेसिस है उसको H1 बोलते हैं. H0 एंड H1, दिस इज हाउ दे आर डिनोटेड. ओके, Then we have next type of hypothesis, which are working hypothesis, descriptive, relational and explanatory. So इनको मैं थोड़ा सा समझा देती हूँ. Working hypothesis क्या होता है? This is basically a tentative statement that researchers propose based on existing knowledge or observation. For example, increasing age is likely to correlate with higher level of internet addiction. ठीक है, so this is a working hypothesis. जो वो प्रपोज करते हैं, उनकी जो एग्जिस्टिंग नॉलेज, अगर आज मैं एक नई रिसर्च करने जाऊँ तो मुझे अभी कुछ सिनेरियो तो पता ही है कि अच्छा जितना जितना एज बढ़ रहा है लोगों का, इंटरनेट एडिक्शन उतना बढ़ रहा है, तो बेस्ड ऑन दैट आई कम अप विद अ हाइपोथेसिस व्हिच इज वर्किंग हाइपोथेसिस. देन वी हैव डिस्क्रिप्टिव हाइपोथेसिस. This is formulated to describe the characteristics of specific population or phenomena. Unlike other types of hypothesis that predict relationship or outcome, a descriptive hypothesis focuses on giving you a snapshot of the current state of affairs. For example, consider the hypothesis the present rate of unemployment in urban areas of India is 10%. So it's not giving you any relationship between two variables. Okay, but it is गिविंग यू अ डिस्क्रिप्शन कि भाई आज की अनएम्प्लॉयमेंट का अर्बन एरियाज में जो रेट है वो 10% है. Then we have relational hypothesis that indicates a relationship between two or more variables, which is different from descriptive because वहां पे हम सिर्फ डिस्क्राइब कर रहे हैं. रिलेशनल में हम रिलेशनशिप इंडिकेट कर रहे हैं between two variables. So here, let's say a good example would be parents residing in urban areas spend more money on education of their children than parents in rural areas. So आप क्या कर रहे हो? आप दो वेरिएबल्स के अंदर आप एक रिलेशनशिप दिखा रहे हो कि अर्बन और रूरल में क्या डिफरेंस है कि पेरेंट्स जो अर्बन एरिया में है वो एजुकेशन पे ज्यादा पैसा खर्चा कर रहे हैं अपने बच्चों का. देन वी हैव एन एक्सप्लेनेटरी हाइपोथेसिस दैट गाइड्स द अंडरस्टैंडिंग ऑफ कॉज एंड इफेक्ट रिलेशनशिप बिटवीन the variables. It basically proposes that the change in one variable will result in change in the other variable, highlighting a directional influence कि ये हो रहा है तो ये भी होगा. For example, consider the hypothesis when salaries increase, spending on food items also increases. मेरी सैलरी बढ़ेगी तो ऐसा तो नहीं है कि मैं पहले अगर मैं सिर्फ दाल और रोटी खाती थी तो आज भी मैं वही खाऊंगी. हो सकता है मैं बाहर खाने लग जाऊं, हो सकता है मैं कभी कभी डेजर्ट्स बनाऊं. So देयर इज अ कोरिलेशन कि सैलरी बढ़ रही है तो फूड आइटम्स में भी आपका जो स्पेंडिंग है वो इंक्रीज हो रहा है. सो दीज आर डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ हाइपोथेसिस. Now we come to next important topic, which is of research design. So research design, if you've seen the steps in research process that I discussed in I think it was topic number 10 or 11 where I was discussing steps in research. It was topic number 10. So I mentioned that there's a step called where you finalize a research design. So it is important for you to know what is a research design, and then it is very important to do a in-depth reading of experimental research design because this is the most crucial type of research design जहाँ से काफी बार questions आते हैं. इसमें बहुत तरह के research designs है. You can see that in a form of this diagram that is there on your screen, which will show you different type of experimental research designs, and all of them are asked in net exam. इनमें से ऐसा कोई भी टॉपिक नहीं है जो मैंने बुक में डाल दिया है बस और इससे कभी क्वेश्चन नहीं आया है. आई हैव डन अ थरो रिसर्च ऑफ 6000 PYQs एंड बेस्ड ऑन दैट आई हैव क्रिएटेड अ बुक कि ऐसा सारे वो टॉपिक्स हम कवर करने की कोशिश करें जो रिपीटेडली पूछे जा रहे हैं और ऐसे कोई भी टॉपिक्स हम नहीं रखे जो आज तक पूछे नहीं गए हैं. बिकॉज देयर सो मच टू स्टडी दैट व्हाई pressurize a student to read things which are not even asked in the question paper. That is the reason why you will also see that after every unit I have given PYQs. So I have given 10 years PYQs, and in all those PYQs you can see that after reading through my book on that particular unit, you will be able to answer all the questions from the PYQs because आपको डायरेक्टली वहां से समझ आएगा कि अच्छा ओके PYQs में ये क्वेश्चन आए थे इसलिए अर्पिता has covered all these topics in the chapters. Okay, then we come on to the next topic, which is key concepts in experimental research. So it is very important that you do not just study experimental research, that what it is and what are the different types of experimental research. You also study some important key concepts, and I have included it in a concept capsule, okay, which is showing which is there displayed on the screen. So basically इसके अंदर बहुत सारे concepts है जैसे randomization, Then there are different types of experimental design, जैसे blind study, double blind study. Then process क्या होता है randomization. So it is very important कि आपको पता हो ये सारे terminology क्या है. And I've written the definition and given you a very simple example to illustrate all of this. So it's very important to have a thorough grip on different concepts that are associated with experimental research. Then comes the next important topic, which is types of biases in experimental research design. So as you can see on screen, there are three main biases that I've highlighted, though there are various others that I've covered in the book, but these are the three biases which I think are very, very important for you to know. But just do not read the three that I'm mentioning here. There are others that are asked in net exam, but because I cannot make a very, very lengthy video, this video is just aimed to give you a snapshot of all the 30 topics. That's why I'm not including that. So types of biases की अगर हम बात करते हैं तो we have placebo effect, we have experimenter effect and we have halo effect. So let's understand them one by one. Placebo effect क्या है? Let's imagine that you are having a headache and someone gives you a sugar pill telling you that it's a powerful painkiller. Homeopathic medicine होता है ना, so if you believe in homeopathy, उनकी सारी दवाइयाँ एक जैसी लगती है, okay? So those are like sugar pills and somebody tells you that it's a very powerful painkiller, you just take it. Surprisingly, the person who is giving you this, you really feel that the person is well knowledgeable and he is a great doctor. So, जैसे ही आपने वो लिया, even though that was a sugar pill, you surprisingly started feeling that your headache is subsiding and you do not know कि वो सिर्फ शुगर पिल था. आपको तो यही सोच के आपने लिया है कि अच्छा इसके अंदर तो कोई पेन किलर है, but actually it was just a sugar pill. So even though it contains no active ingredients, still you could see some relief in the headache. Now this fascinating phenomena is known as the placebo effect. Placebos are an essential component of experimental research design because basically ये वो बताता है कि कोई एक harmless pill या treatment that has no real effect can also lead to a belief कि आपको relief मिला है. So it is basically used in research to see if the mere belief of receiving a treatment can cause some changes in the person. I'll give you another interesting example. So let's say, for instance, to test a new medication for headache relief, researchers might divide participants into three groups. The first group receives an actual medication. The second group receives a placebo, which is basically एक medicine दिया but उसका कोई काम नहीं है, मतलब वो सिर्फ एक sugar pill है. And the third group receives no treatment. By comparing the outcomes of all the three groups, researchers can determine if the medication's effectiveness and the placebo's effect कैसे affect कर रहे हैं. Then there is something called experimenter's effect, which is also known as experimenter's bias or researcher's bias. Now, this basically happens when a researcher's belief or expectations unintentionally influence the research result of an experiment. For example, let's say, imagine a teacher testing a new teaching method. Now, if a teacher believes that the new method in which she's teaching a class is more effective, she might unknowingly give more attention or praise to students using it, which could make those students perform better just because of the teacher's attitude. Now, this could make it seem like teaching method is more successful than the earlier one, but what is actually happening is that उसका जो एक्सपेरिमेंटर या रिसर्चर है उसकी बायस ने रिसर्च का जो फाइंडिंग है उसको थोड़ा सा वो कर दिया है, चेंज कर दिया है, मैनिपुलेट कर दिया है. तो ये बायसेस है अलग अलग. ओके, now we move on to the next topic. The next important topic is types of sampling. Now, types of sampling is one of the most important topic from Unit 2 Research Aptitude because again, at least one question from this topic is always appearing in UGC NET paper 1 irrespective of the shift you see. So this becomes a very, very important topic and if you if you want to see the importance of this topic, try going through this topic from my book and then right after I complete discussing the types of sampling, I have given a big box which is about a page long in which I have discussed questions from this topic that have come in the past UGC NET exams, and this is one of the biggest quiz station box in the entire book because I have this habit of adding quiz station boxes after every important topic so that whenever you read a topic you know that these are the types of questions that are being asked from the topic, and you can check whether you are able to answer it based on your understanding of the text. And while I was writing down sampling, I saw that there were so many questions that came from sampling that I wanted to include almost all of them, but I could not. But at least there were about 15-20 questions that I've included in that quiz station. So do check that out. Apart from that, one good news, because sampling is a very important topic, I have given additional videos for students who get bored reading textbooks. So you can just scan the QR code. It is there right in front of this topic, types of sampling, and this QR code is going to lead you to a website of McGraw Hill, where you will find video lecture explaining all the different types of sampling. Another important thing, that some people are facing issue with the video lectures playing because they are not adding the scratch code that is there in the front cover of the book. So I'll show you. This is the book, and when you open the front cover here, you see a scratch code. So if you add the scratch code in the after scanning the QR code, only then the videos are going to work. Okay, moving on to the next important topic number 18, errors in sampling. Now, as you can see on screen, there are different types of sampling errors, and all of them becomes important because questions have been repeatedly asked from this topic. So if we talk about random sampling error, what is it? It is basically caused by chance factor in the process of selecting a random sample. For example, if a researcher randomly selects 50 students from a university to survey their study habits, it is possible that by chance the selected sample might include an unusually high number of students who study less than average. Now, this could lead to incorrect conclusion that the overall student body in that particular university or college studies more than they actually do. Okay. Then we have errors related to population. So population specific errors, basically these happen when researchers do not accurately identify or understand the population they want to study. If you are getting confused what is population, what is sample, don't worry, I have explained these terms in detail in the book. It is very important that before you even study what is sampling, you know sampling, population, sample, all these terms should be clear in your head. Okay. So अगर हम बात करें population specific error की, तो a very simple example would be that if a survey is meant to gather opinions from university students but accidentally include responses from high school students rather than university students, it introduces errors because the data that they have collected is not representative of the intended population. So this is population specific error. Then we have systematic error. Systematic error को systematic bias भी बोला जाता है, because कई बार आपको MCQ में दो terms मिल जाएंगे, आप सोचोगे मैंने तो systematic error पढ़ा था, ये systematic bias क्या है? So it's important to know the other word for the same term. Now, systematic error in sampling happens when there is consistent mistake or problem in how the sample is chosen, leading to results that are consistently off from the true population. For example, let us say a company wants to survey people about their favorite TV shows. Now, they decide to call the landline phone numbers during the day to ask their opinions. However, this method might systematically leave out younger people who mostly use cell phones or work during the day. So, they are not going to be available on the landline, right? As a result, the survey results might give biased view of the population's TV preference. Okay, so these are different types of errors. Then we have also something called selection error and sample frame error. You can see the definition and examples on the screen. Then there is something called response error and non-response error. So response error क्या है? Response error or response bias occurs when participants in a survey or a study do not provide completely truthful or accurate answers. This can happen for various reasons, like they're wanting to give answers that they think are socially acceptable, or simply agreeing with statement without fully considering them, understanding them. So let us say there is a survey asking people about their opinions on environmental issues. Now, some respondents might answer in a way they think is socially acceptable, stating that they always recycle and use eco-friendly product, even when they do not always do it. This is a form of social desirability bias, where people want to present themselves in a positive light. So these are response error कि भाई सैंपल तो सही चूज किया बट सैंपल आंसर ही गलत दे रहे हैं, जो भी लोगों से हम सवाल पूछ रहे हैं वो बेचारे झूठे निकल रहे हैं. So they are response error. Then there is something called non-response error. Now, raw response error कब होता है? It occurs when researchers are unable to obtain responses from all selected participants, leading to incomplete data. Now, this may happen due to participants' refusal to participate, or their inability to reach them, or failure to complete the survey after initial contact. Now, non response error is problematic because it can introduce bias into the survey results. If the individuals who do not respond systematically differ from those who do, for example, they may have different opinions or experiences, then in that case, the survey result will not accurately depict the views of the entire population. हो सकता है ना कि मेरे को अगर 100 लोगों से बात करनी है और 100 में से 30 लोगों ने मेरा फोन नहीं उठाया और वो 30 सारे एक जैसे हुए, तो जो 70 मेरा फोन उठा रहे हैं वो सब एक तरीके के हैं और 30 एक तरीके के हैं, तो मेरा तो पूरा सैंपल का पर्पस ही डिफीट हो जाएगा, बिकॉज आई डू नॉट गेट लाइक यूनिफॉर्म डेटा. मेरे सारे लोगों ने तो फोन ही नहीं उठाया, राइट? सो दैट्स द प्रॉब्लम. Then we come to next topic, which is testing of hypothesis. Very, very important. Again, now यहाँ पे भी I have given a video, so QR code is there, or you can watch that video to get a better understanding of this topic, because again, this is a slightly technical topic, plus not a lot of people are acquainted with all these terms, hypothesis and all of this. Again, one very different thing that I've done is that I have given you a lot of memes in the book. So one of the memes I'm showing on the screen, basically this talks about errors in hypothesis testing. Okay, so दो major type के errors होते हैं. Okay, type A, type 1 and type 2 errors. So आप जब ये मीम देखते हो तो आपको एग्जैक्टली समझ आ जाता है कि कैसे ये दोनों तरह के एरर एक दूसरे से अलग है. बिकॉज अगर आप टेक्निकल लैंग्वेज में पढ़ोगे तो आपको शायद लग सकता है, ओ माय गॉड, दिस इज वेरी कंफ्यूजिंग. बट व्हेन यू हैव समथिंग वेरी वेरी रिलेटेबल कि भाई ये एरर क्या है, एक इंसान जो प्रेग्नेंट नहीं है उसको वो प्रेग्नेंट बता रहा है टेस्ट, तो दैट मीन्स दिस इज वन सॉर्ट ऑफ एन एरर. अनदर इज अ लेडी इज प्रेग्नेंट बट द टेस्ट इज शोइंग दैट she is not, then this is another sort of an error. So that is how you have to build an understanding of all those topics. And finally we come to another interesting topic, types of hypothesis test, where we have parametric, non-parametric test. This time I saw that there were a lot of questions from this particular topic, that's why I've added it. They give you one of these tests and ask you that under which category will it belong, or they are going to do it absolutely opposite. So they are going to ask that which of the following is not a parametric test. So you need to know the names of all the parametric and non-parametric tests. That is very, very important. Just to give you a subtle idea of what parametric and non-parametric tests are. So parametric tests make assumptions about the shape and characteristics of the data. They assume that the data follows a specific pattern, like एक curve है, bell curve. When you go through this entire analysis वाला portion of my book, you will understand these terms. Bell curve क्या है, ये सबसे काफी questions आते हैं. So basically, parametric test में you think that there is a pattern that is getting formed. But non-parametric tests do not make these assumptions about the data. They are more flexible and can be used when we are unsure if the data actually follows any specific pattern. Okay, so this is all about steps of research. We have covered broadly everything. Now we move on to the next important chapter, and gladly the last chapter of research aptitude, which is chapter number 9, where I have discussed thesis writing and all the things related to thesis writing. So let's start with new topics from that particular chapter. Moving on to the next important topic, which is topic number 21. Styles of referencing. So styles of referencing क्या है? There are two major types of referencing, MLA format and APA format. Okay, and there is a way to quote the references or books from where you are taking some material while you are drafting your thesis, and it is very important for you to name them in a proper manner, which is approved by APA, which is American Psychological Association, or MLA handbook. And how to do it, I have mentioned that in a form of table, and it is important for you to know because at times they are going to ask you to identify a book which is wrongly referenced as per APA style. So you have to actually go through the entire name of the book and see if a comma or a full stop is wrongly placed, and that is how you identify the wrong option. Okay, so it is very important for you to know the styles of referencing. I have showcased that in a tabular form. You can see it on screen. It's there from my book. Then is another interesting topic of footnotes and endnotes. Again, there are different types of footnotes and endnotes that are used, different words that are used. I have again summarized it in form of a table, so you can check that out. Very important to go through this topic in a detailed manner. I have seen a couple of questions from this topic repeatedly asked in net exam. So this gets very important, and this is something which they have not mentioned in the syllabus. So if you are not aware of the terms that I'm sharing here in the book, then you might feel that this is an out of syllabus question, which it is not, because this is a topic which is from the syllabus, though they have not explicitly mentioned it anywhere in the syllabus. Then comes another interesting topic, which is types of research publication. This is a topic which is there in the syllabus. Nowadays, I do not see a lot of questions from it, but you never know, the pattern keeps on changing drastically year after year. So it's important to even know the different types of research publication. You can see that on screen. I'm not going to explain this to you because this is something that all of us are mostly aware of, how our research paper, article, thesis and dissertation different from each other. Then, if we talk about another important topic which have gained a lot of popularity in the last few years, is research ethics. So when it comes to research ethics, they are going to not just ask you what is research ethics, but they are going to dive in a lot deeper and ask you important terminology associated with research ethics, like fidelity, social responsibility. All these terms you should be aware of, and these are again things that all of us know. We know that what is right, what is wrong, how a researcher should ethically conduct a research. He should not harm the participants. He should not um, you know um, do something which is considered unethical in research. So all of those terms are there for your knowledge. You can see that on screen. Apart from that, it is very important for you to know some other important terminologies related to research. I have included all of that in form of a QR code which you can scan, and it is going to redirect you to supplementary reading PDF, wherein you will get all the other important things related to research. Okay, and this is also going to include important IT tools that are used by researchers, because these are topics which, though are not asked in the recent exams, but is a part of the core syllabus. So you need to be aware of these topics as well. Okay, so post that we have another interesting topic related to research ethics, which is plagiarism. Now, plagiarism, you all know, is an unethical practice that is done by couple of researchers, and that is why it is important to know different types of plagiarism. You can see that on your screen, and this is very important. You have to remember the types, because they might give you a situational based question. They might ask you that, okay, this is a form of research that was done, and what do you think, which type of plagiarism did the researcher get involved into? Then is another topic, which is topic number 27, levels of plagiarism, where we have four major levels. We have level 1, minor plagiarism. We have level 2, moderate. Level 3, serious. And level 4, very serious. So minor plagiarism happens when 10% of someone else's work you have added in your research without acknowledging the source. And you have to also know the penalty for each of this. Then moderate plagiarism happens when the copying is between 10% to 40%. Then serious plagiarism happens when it is 40 to 60%. And very serious is basically you're copying more than 60% of someone else's work without giving him acknowledgement. So basically, आप पूरा का पूरा उसका thesis ही copy करके paste कर रहे हो, and you're not telling anybody. So it is again something that you need to be aware of, क्योंकि ये एक ऐसा topic है, again it is not mentioned in the syllabus, और इससे बहुत simple questions आते हैं. तो if you do not know the percentages, you are going to get it wrong. और याद रखने में आपको कितना ही time जा रहा है. This is a topic which is in itself complete now that I have discussed it with you. इसमें और कोई भी deeper layers नहीं है. Then comes another important topic. We are almost verging on the end of this video completion, and this topic is impact factor. Impact factor basically kya hai? This talks about the measure to gauge the importance of an academic journal within specific field. So basically, we have different journals, and to know how important or how relevant that journal is for that particular field, you have something called impact factor, IF, okay, ranking. This is similar to how we say that we have ISI marked on certain products, which basically says that ये tested है, ये certified है. तो similarly journals को certify करने के लिए impact factor use होता है. And then there are different indexes, H index, G index, I10 index and citation index. So this is again something that you need to be aware of, and all of this is concerned with the journals in which research papers or synopses are submitted. Then when we come to topic number 29 and 30, this is all about different institutes that are helping in research, that are working in the field of research. So we have digital initiatives in the field of research. This is topic number 29, where we talk about so many different government institutes that are working in the or initiatives that have been taken by Government of India in the field of research. And then there is topic number 30, which talks about digital initiatives specifically taken by IITs. So then this is something that you need to be also aware of. You must have seen, if you have ever gone through the PYQs, you must have seen questions from Shodh Ganga, Shodh Gangotri. All these questions are nothing but coming from this particular topic, wherein they are discussing digital initiatives taken by government in the field of research. And this is an integrated topic. So it has topics from ICT and research. So basically what is happening here is that they are merging two units together, and this is something which showcases the new pattern, where you will not get unit specific questions, you will see questions which are getting merged from different units. So teaching aptitude में भी आप जब देखते हैं LMS में question आता है, learning management system, so that is nothing but they are integrating ICT with teaching aptitude. Similarly here, when we look at digital initiatives, they are integrating digital initiatives, that is ICT, higher education and research. They are clubbing three topics together: unit number 2, unit number 8 and unit number 10. So with that note, I come to the end of the video. Let me know in the comment section whether you like the 30 topics that I've discussed with you and how helpful was this video in your study preparation. I'll see you next time. That's it from my side for this video lecture. I'll see you very soon in the next video lecture. Till the time we meet next, happy learning, keep loving literature and stay tuned to arpitakarwa.com.